How's it going, guys? It's Epsilon here, and today we are focusing on a tank that has got left behind, at least in terms of what players believe are really strong tanks in World of Tanks, and albeit the TVP T50-51, which is the showcase of today's video, is a tank that probably isn't the highest pinnacle of competitive tanks within World of Tanks. It can still be very strong under the right hands, and of course we're going to showcase how it can be so strong and why you may want to go for this Czech tier 10 medium tank. And of course it's been outshone by, I guess, its counterpart, its big brother, the VZ55, and of course the releases of some new medium tanks, for example like the Progetto 65. So in this game, what can you expect from the TVP? Well, it has the 4 shell 320 damage autoloader with a total damage capacity of 1080 hit points, which is by no means awful, and the rate of fire of this vehicle in terms of it unloading those shells is super quick. You've got 1.5 seconds between shells, which is amazing. I mean, it's going to allow you to kick out all 4 shells within quick succession. Of course you get 3 lots of 1.5 seconds, so within 4 seconds of dishing out the first shell you will have done 1080 damage. And of course retracking opponents is super easy with this vehicle, because not only do you get the kind of retrack capability of just the intricate reload, the accuracy of the vehicle is fantastic, and as well as that, the standard rounds are of course one of the best rounds in World of Tanks, APCR, and with 1400 meters a second shell velocity, it's very difficult for you to actually miss opponents on the move. So that's one other reason why the TVP can be very kind of underrated in my personal opinion. What is not underrated, however, is when the opponents push the eastern side of the map, or at least aggressively push the eastern side, because this is what happens. The opponents will push into the corner. You can see it on the mini-map here. They've all pushed up way too aggressively. None of the team have actually come on from the TVP's team to actually counter them from just pushing, and it can end up with scenarios where the enemy team just cap super quickly, and no one likes actually losing to cap, and 90% of the time people who actually win by cap hate winning by cap because they could have done a hell of a lot more damage. But you're seeing here when the heat rounds get loaded against these heavy tanks how kind of so nice it is to be dealing the amount of damage that he does in a one clip, as you saw 1235 with a high roll on those rounds. So although he's dealing a lot of damage, it's now coming to the stage of the battle where the heavies are no longer easy damage, and you're going to be having to trade with them. And when you're in a medium that is essentially a glass cannon, or at least a tank that has absolutely no armor, you are not going to be bouncing anything. Any round that hits you will be most likely penning you, unless you get a super kind of lucky auto ricochet angle or something like that. And even some of the side armor can be overmatched, I believe, on the TVP by some of the higher kind of penetration guns, or at least the higher caliber guns in World of Tanks. And luckily you're seeing there that the Maus gets set on fire by one of his teammates, which is absolutely lovely. He can get his 90% of his hit points removed in a few shots from in general, and he actually sets the Maus on fire. Sorry, oh god, that's even better. 4,400 damage has been done by the TVP so far, and with the reload of the vehicle being actually stellar. This reload is amazing. You can reload in, I believe, the region of about 20 seconds, if not less, and when you're kicking out 1,000 damage every single time, the DPM can be really effective, because not only are you dealing this damage every 20 seconds or so, but you're consistently dealing the damage because it's an autoloader. So not only do you have good DPM, but effective DPM as well. So that's one key thing that you'll notice with the TVP over something maybe like a, I don't know, a Caliban. You know, we all know the classic example of an autoloader gets tons of alpha damage in a clip, but it's not necessarily effective because it may have a super long auto intricate reload, and it also may have a super inaccurate gun. But the TVP has all of the kind of benefits of being a single shot but actually having 4 shells. So it's one of my favourites. I think I'm definitely going to be focusing on trying to get this thing on my account as quickly as possible on PC, and we'll be working towards it in the next month or so, and hopefully we can actually see it join my account. Of course, at the moment, currently working on the 60 TP, which is not particularly very fun, but there you go. And we're actually on the tier 8 in that line, I believe, off the top of my head. So you're seeing here, Super Conqueror does get removed, and very easily, may I say, because of the fire. Yet again, TVP setting them on fire, and that's one of the key reasons why the TVP is so strong, because if you are good at aiming, you know where to actually position your shells, then because you've got 4 of them, you've got 4 times the potential to do module damage, which is what is causing the fires, and of course ammo racks and anything like that. And autoloaders typically are tanks that deal a lot more, well, do a lot more damage all in one go, which means you can focus all of the rounds into the weaker areas of the vehicle. Once you've done that, you can then get some potential module damage. Now, 7,500 damage is a stellar performance for a tier 10 vehicle, and it's going to continue within this replay as the enemy team progress towards the hill. Now, this is not the ideal scenario, I won't lie, for the TVP, because fighting down a hill with limited gun depression that the TVP has, at least to a degree, doesn't have terrible, I mean like god awful, but I believe it's 5 degrees off the top of my head, so you don't have the best, and it means that yes, if they are kind of fighting up the hill, they're going to get elevation on you, which means that you are going to have gun depression to counter them, and often the first thing that you see of a tank is going to be the turret, naturally, if you're kind of aiming down onto someone, and unfortunately most of the time you won't be able to pen the turrets of things like the 60 TP with your standard rounds that you're seeing here, since they only have 246mm of penetration, or 248 as with most of the tier 10 mediums even. So now is the time to kind of pull back. The enemy artillery's been a little bit of a rat trying to get some shots into him, and you've got to be careful in these vehicles since, as we've already mentioned, the armor model is not particularly very good, and so you have to be careful, and even more careful now that the FE4005 on the enemy team has been spotted. He's kind of waiting for him to take a mistake, and now it's the time to get him out of the game, because if he can do that, he can then move on with his game, not have to worry about being potentially one-shot by the enemy vehicle. It's looking very much kind of a awful position at this point. The enemy 121B is now aggressively attacking the hill. The FE4005 is now probably reloaded at this point to be able to get another shell into one of his victims that are going to be either the STB, the AMX, or of course the TVP that we're watching here. So the key thing with the TVP in these sorts of scenarios is not to do anything silly. What you want to do is make sure that when you're playing the vehicle that you allow the opponents to overexpose themselves, as you should do with all autoloaders or potentially all tanks, depending on what they are. And when they overexpose themselves, because of the clip potential, you can finish them off. And basically at the end of games, the TVP becomes super dangerous, not for just the enemy tanks that are going to be aggressively attacking you, but also for being able to just win games straight out. Because what you can do is you can get forward, you can deal with the damage on these tanks, and they're not going to be able to really counter you, and especially if you've got hit points and you've preserved your health till the end of the game, things like this 60 TP are going to suffer, and they do. And with a nice couple of rounds into the side of him there, nicely well aimed, with a good player behind the wheel of the TVP, games like this can happen. 9,580 damage has been done. So this is one of the best performances in the TVP that I've seen, especially in a scenario like this where the enemy are pushing up the hill. I very rarely see the TVP come out on top, and I very rarely see the TVP being in one of the top replays on the What Replay site, just purely because it's not typically the easiest to play, and it's very punishable if the enemy tanks actually know what they're doing. Unfortunately for the enemy team in this game, they didn't know what they were doing, to be honest. There's just a 121B left. There is of course a teammate and the enemy artillery still left alive within this game, and it's very imperative that they don't throw away any of their hit points, and especially not being kind of in this area where the artillery can land a shell. Of course you are protected to a degree by the hill area over here in this position, but as soon as you move to where the STB is, it's a dangerous position indeed. Now the 121B on the enemy team has now kind of progressed, and unfortunately for him it's looking looking like it's going to be game over. The GWE100 misses narrowly with the shell there and doesn't manage to do any damage, and it's now a case of mopping up the remaining damage, having done 10,829 damage and getting 294 assistance. And that is pretty much what the TVP has to offer. The pinnacle of what the TVP can do, having both the speed, the mobility, the view range, the actual capability of dealing with individual targets at the late stages of games where you can remove the rest of their hit points. So preserving the tank for the longest time is obviously how you can do super well in the TVP, how you're going to be able to go for your third mark and win games purely by your own skill. And that's something I always loved about this vehicle. Of course, the enemy GWE100 tries with the YOLO shot and it doesn't work, thankfully for the player here, who had one of the best performances in the TVP T50 51 that I've seen in a long time. So thank you very much for uploading it to the What Replay site. Of course, leave your own opinions on this tank. Have I got it completely wrong, or do you think that this vehicle is something else in World of Tanks and it's highly underrated, as I do? Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more replays like this coming out very, very soon. And of course, we've got a ton of replays on the playlist on screen, which you can check out, that are similar to this replay here. So thank you, and I'll see you there. Goodbye.